These desires of the senses are such. When we strive to quench them, for a moment they seem to subside, but then they come back with redoubled intensity. The sensual desires are not eliminated by their fulfillment, they are eliminated by self-control. We have these 5 senses in our body through which we experience the world around us. They are necessary, but if they become uncontrolled, they can trip even the most noble of efforts. These senses desire their objects, and we rush to fulfill our desires. The problem is, these desires of the senses are like a fire that we are trying to douse by pouring ghee on it. For a moment, it seems to have gotten quenched, but then it arises with doubled intensity. The Srimad Bhagavatam relates the story of Saubhari Rishi. Saubhari Rishi was one of the most intense renunciants in history. He used to sit in Jal Samadhi on the bottom of the river Yamuna. However, once he saw 2 fish mating, and that disturbed his mind. He came out of the river, renouncing his samadhi with the desire to marriage. The desire had arisen in him, and he sought to fulfill it. Nearby was the kingdom of Mandhata. He went to the king and said, "I wish to marry. Please give the hand of one of your daughters in marriage to me." Mandhata had 50 daughters. He shrugged. "Will I ruin the life of one of my daughters by marrying her to this emaciated old sadhu?" So Mandhata played a trick. He said, "O sage, I'll bring all my daughters before you. Whoever selects you, you can marry her." Mandhata thought none would select him. However, Saubhari understood the trick. He said, "All right, king, we will do this tomorrow." The next day, by virtue of his yogic strength, Saubhari made himself extremely beautiful. When he went to the court of the king and the princesses were brought there, they all selected him. "Father, please marry me to him." Mandhata was now bound by his words. He was obliged to marry all 50 of his daughters to the sage. Mandhata was worried. How will this sage live with all of them? But Saubhari was such an amazing yogi. By his yoga bal, he created 50 forms of his. And he manifested 50 palaces and lived with each of them. From each of his wives, he had 10 children. And those 10 children, the Srimad Bhagavatam states, had further 10 children, until a whole city got established. Tasvapatnyamya janaya datma tulyani sarvatah ekaikasyam dashadasha prakritir virbhubhushaya. Thousands of years went by. One day, Saubhari was pondering, and he realized the state he had reached. He exclaimed, "Aho imam pashyam me vinasham." "O human beings, look at my ruin. What ability do you have to enjoy the pleasures of the senses? I strived with yoga bal, but there was no end to it. So these desires of the senses are such. When we strive to quench them, for a moment they seem to subside, but then they come back with redoubled intensity. The way out then is to learn to hold them in check. That is why on this 5th day of life transformation, I would like to recommend the tool of shunning temptation. Remember, these desires, when they first enter, they are so tiny. When the person took his first peg of alcohol, he never thought the day would come when it would grip his mind so strongly that he would not be able to live without it. When the lady first took her puff, she did not ever think the day would come when she would become a chain smoker. But those little desires, when fulfilled again and again, gripped the mind so strongly that they practically shackled it in iron chains. It's like the huge sequoia trees in California. One beetle made its home there. What was one little beetle against this huge 300-foot tree? But soon the beetle laid eggs, and there were 50 beetles squirming around. 50 beetles against this tree was a grossly unequal battle. But they further multiplied until there were thousands and then tens and thousands of those insects. And before long, they had nibbled the life out of the tree and dropped the huge sequoia to the ground. Similarly, when we indulge in the pleasures of the senses, we don't realize that the same activity, if repeated again and again, can lead to the downfall of our life. That is why at the first instance itself, check temptation. Keep the senses in restraint. These are like the horses that need to be controlled. Let us practice the control with this knowledge that the sensual desires are not eliminated by their fulfillment. They are eliminated by self-control. Let this be the wisdom and the practice that we try to implement. And tomorrow we shall continue in our journey of life transformation with the 6th self-improvement tool.